Gravesend in Kent, and a fine example of a large Victorian southeastern railway station, with its elaborate wrought ironwork, decorative hoardings, and the beginning of a journey which over 40 years ago could have taken the rail traveller on a completely different excursion than the one offered today. Leaving Gravesend station, trains will pass under various bridges and walkways. These lead to small alleyways and pubs, giving this part of the town a truly Dickensian look. Passing under the A226 Gravesend Road, the train reaches Denton Crossing. An industrialised area, this was originally Denton Halt, which opened on July the 1st, 1906 and closed on the 4th of December 1961. Leaving Denton Halt, the train now crosses and runs beside the Thames and Medway Canal, which was the property of the railway until 1934. The industry located here would have been well served by this canal. Currently undergoing restoration, remnants of the past still remain visible. The next stop along the line would have been Milton Range Halt. At this now almost derelict looking platform would have stopped an old H-Class 044T, usually for passengers bound to or from a nearby rifle range. This was closed as a passenger halt in 1906. Today the southeastern service trains fly past, there being only a short distance to reach Hoo Junction and British Neuralite. And passing straight through on their way to Higham Station, before veering on a southeasterly course to take a 2-mile tunnel journey where the Thames Medway Canal once ran, to emerge at Strood Station. A down loco pulling its container load heads for the Hoo Junction downyard, which consists of 3 through sidings and 3 dead-end sidings and enough space for 219 wagons. In 1899 sidings were laid here by the South Eastern Railway Company for the provision of ballast, in order to help relieve overstretched facilities at Strood and Rochester. Having celebrated its centenary in July 1999, and with increased use by EWS and rail track maintenance trains, Hoo Junction can expect many successful years ahead. A Class 32 Sulzer diesel locomotive loaded with ballast pulls out of the downyard. And a General Motors Class 59 from the Foster Yeoman Aggregates depot at the Isle of Grain speedily passes through bound for Gravesend and its final destination. The upyard here is quite a large affair, with its 2 reception lines, departure line, 14 no-through sidings and a total capacity for 728 wagons. A varied array of wagons, coaches and vans are in permanent residence here, some it seems for a long time. The old deserted platform and shelter of the Hoo Junction staff halt awaits the passing of another down loco as it heads towards the eastern end of the junction. Trundling its way onto a single-line branch and continuing on its easterly course, the train will pass over the canal and road, before picking up speed as it heads off on an even course across the Higham Marshes and the first stage of the 100 of Hoo branch line heading for Cliff Station. The construction of the 100 of Hoo Railway was started in 1878. The 100 of Hoo Railway Company having been formed a few years earlier. The train now passes over a level crossing close to Higham Church. And 200 yards further down, an upward bound train slows as it passes another branch in the line. this time being only half a mile in length and leading to the Brett Gravel Terminal. From 1961 to 1969, this line was in use for the transportation of cement from the works at Cliff. The line consisted of 4 sidings for loading and a run-round loop. The diesel loco now passes Higham Church on its way to Hoo Junction. And continuing down the line for approximately 1.5 miles, a passenger steam train during the days of the Hoo service would have made its first stop at Cliff Station. Being of a traditional design for an 1880s South Eastern Railway station, and in its day dealt with a fair amount of farm produce such as milk and fruit. The station was given a down platform and a passing loop in anticipation of increased holiday traffic. Today nothing remains of the station or the station house. A few remnants of the platform structure lying in the undergrowth are all that may now be found. Leaving Cliff, the line passes through Spendif via an embankment, and now heading towards High Halstow Halt. By mid-1881 work on the line was well underway, as was the construction of the stations. A Class 37 passes through Spendif on its way to High Halstow. Emerging from the mist of a typically bleak winter's day on the Hoo Peninsula, and coming off the embankment as the line reaches its peak at Cooling, 150 feet above sea level. The track now passing into a cutting and under a bridge on this isolated section of the line. At this point the line runs parallel and at around 1 mile south to the village of Cooling. After passing near to Cooling, the line will now enter into a gentle descent, swinging southwards to approach High Halstow. The wooden posts seen here marking where once stood an old crossing and very small signal box known as Wybourne Siding, passing which would have now seen you arrive at High Halstow Halt, which today still remains very much in isolation. The halt was originally a very basic affair, consisting of no more than a wooden platform, the concrete construction seen here being its replacement. Now covered in weeds, the concrete base of the shelter is all that now remains. Leaving High Helstow, the line continues on its southeasterly course, heading for Charnel Street, which would have been the next station along the line. Passing under the Ducks Court Road, a Class 57 with its freight load in tow rumbles past, bound for the Isle of Grain. On Friday of March the 31st, 1882, the train arriving here at Charnel Street Station would have done so to mark the grand opening of the line itself. Situated at around 1 mile from the village of Hoe St Werburg, the station was designed along the same lines as Cliff, but had no down platform until 1933. Today, the old bridge and road near to where the station was situated have now been bypassed, and a comparison of the two now shows how very dilapidated and inadequate they had become. This one-time stretch of the A228 Ratcliffe Highway is now cut off to all but access traffic. As an upward bound goods passes under the new and old bridges, we might reflect on that grand opening of over 100 years ago, with hundreds of people from High Helstow, Hoe and Cliff, many of which visiting Gravesend for the first time at only 8 miles distance. By 1882, work on the extension of the line from Charnel Street was underway, and in July of that year, plans for a pier at Grain were approved. Leaving Charnel Street Station and continuing in its gentle descent, the line passes under another bridge, this being at Roper's Lane under the old byway, again devoid of any traffic and looking in a very sorry state, especially this section where the Chattenden Naval Tramway used to run to Kingsnorth. Passing under the bridge, the next passenger stop would have been Beluncle Halt. Situated approximately half a mile from Charnel Street, and boasting 2 sidings and a small ticket office. And as at High Helstow, the wooden shelter later being replaced by concrete. Today, the area near to where the halt stood has been built on, and as can be seen is well overgrown in the summertime. "200 yards to the south of Beluncle Halt, on the Stoke Road, can be found a small disused bridge, being once a part of the Stoke Road itself, under which ran the line of the Chattenden Naval Tramway down to the airship station that once existed at Kingsnorth, and now the site of a power station and industrial estate. A branch was also added in 1929, connecting to the Berry Wiggins Oil Company, although a direct connection to Southern Rail was made in 1932. The line to Kingsnorth was closed in 1940 and removed soon after. The old southern connection to Bury Wiggins can still be seen here, overgrown and long out of use, with all supplies now being brought in by road. The rusty rails rejoining the main branch line a short distance past Beluncle. And continuing its journey to the Isle of Grain, the line will now come in very close to the marshlands and creeks of the River Medway. This would have given the passenger some both weird and wonderful views of the mudflats and islets of this, some may say, inhospitable and bleak-looking part of the peninsula. Nevertheless, the sight of a steam engine chugging its way along close to the shoreline here must have been a sight to behold. Passing over Stoke Creek Crossing and 2 miles on from Beluncle Halt, an old 044 tank engine would now find itself pulling into Middle Stoke Halt, with the same story being of wooden construction and the location being marshy and isolated, but having an advantage over other stations on the line, that being it was far more conveniently situated for the village of Stoke itself. Today the location again remains desolate, with the concrete base of the station shelter visible in the winter time, but overgrown and barely visible during the summer. But on a nice summer's day, quite a pleasant location to find oneself in. A mile further down the line, and the train now arrives at Stoke Crossing, slowing to a crawl as it approaches the Grain Road. With the opening of the Allhallows branch line on the 14th of May 1932, this was named as Stoke Junction Halt, with the old wooden platform having been situated near to the road at around this point. As the train heads off on the last leg of its journey to Grain, an old passenger train may have taken another branch line here. Diverging from the main line just up a short distance on the other side of this gate, it would have veered sharply northwards, crossing marshlands bound for Allhallows-on-Sea. The line of the track, which has long since been removed, may be followed through these long, narrowly fenced fields. During the 1920s, the number of working classes taking annual holidays at coastal resorts was on the increase. Because of this, the idea of Allhallows-on-Sea was born. The line ran between where these two gates are now situated, across this narrow track, and followed the line of trees seen going into the distance here, before arriving at Allhallows-on-Sea station. Authorised for construction in 1929, with work starting on the 1 3/4 mile stretch of track in August 1931. The first train to pull into Allhallows-on-Sea being an R-Class 044T and set number 380, carrying over 700 members of the public with cheap day returns from Charing Cross. Being at only 37 miles distance from Charing Cross, Allhallows looked like being a complete success. And by the mid-1930s, with the number of holidaymakers on the increase, the line was subsequently doubled. Such was the tourist boom, that up until the final days before the Second World War, the Southern Railway Company ran 12 trains both ways on weekdays, whilst on Sundays it would be 14 down and 11 up. However, the post-war years marked an increase in living standards as well as car ownership. This newfound freedom resulted in a migration away from destinations such as Allhallows-on-Sea to what was considered to be more glamorous locations such as Margate and the other coastal resorts. And so, on the 4th of December 1961, the line to Allhallows went the same way as many other branch lines throughout the country, the final curtain being lowered on the end of an era, and another passenger service to have come and gone within 30 years. Ironically, this photo showing cars parked right where the line itself used to be, next to the now abandoned and dilapidated station. All that remains today is the water tank found in the garden of a park home, one of many now built on the site of the old station. Bordering the Thames estuary, Allhallows today still remains a holiday destination for many, but those grand old days of yesteryear are now almost unknown by most of the present-day inhabitants of the village, and the hopes of Southern Rail in turning Allhallows into a holiday town were never to be. Rejoining the main branch line, a Class 37 heads out across the marshlands of the Isle of Grain. Passing storage tanks near to the site where once stood part of the BP oil refinery. Three trains per day run to the large container port here, but when necessity demands, this may rise to 8 or more per day. A Class 47 with containers in tow bound for Thamesport passes over Grain Level Crossing. The old grain halt station was situated just in from the road, opposite the signal box. Opened in 1906 and serving the 500 residents of Grain Village, lying 2 miles to the north. No more than 100 yards past Grain Crossing, the strip of ground on the right here marks the area where the replacement platform for Grain Halt was sited. Simply called Grain, it was built mainly for the better servicing of the new BP oil refinery, which opened here in 1955. Today the sidings are used for the stabling and repair of the various wagons and oil tanker trucks. A further short run and the freight train branches off into what is, without doubt, the most technologically advanced container port in Britain today. Here, Morris cranes mounted on rails are used for container transfer to and from the trains. The container storage area here uses fully automated computer-controlled driverless gantry cranes. Since its opening and first receiving 9,600 industrial containers in 1990, Thamesport has gone from strength to strength, now handling over 350,000 containers per year. Container movement to and from the ships is achieved via 5 high-speed ship-to-shore gantry cranes. Being the first port in the country to utilise driverless technology, Thamesport's hopes for the future lie in the introduction of near-complete automation, which would, to all intents and purposes, eliminate any necessity for human intervention on the quayside. Lying close to the mouth of the Thames estuary, Thamesport regularly accommodates many of the largest deep-sea container ships from all over the world, and due to the vastness of its location, will be able to greatly expand. And the original aim of becoming one of the largest container ports in Europe looks like being fulfilled. From the high-tech operations of a 21st century port, and continuing on the original branch line, journeying back in time once again, the final destination for our Victorian ancestors would soon be glimpsed. Seen from the right-hand window of the train, perhaps on a typically misty, murky day here, the Port Victoria Hotel would now loom into view. Opened in 1882 and heralding great expectations, the hotel and pier were originally only planned as being temporary structures. With the 400-foot pier extending to the deep water level, and sited at only 38 miles distance from London, Port Victoria certainly had an advantage over the port lying on the opposite side of the river, at Queensborough on the Isle of Sheppey. Also, being sited at the mouth of the River Thames, had an advantage over Gravesend, and was hoped to eventually become a major continental port. British and foreign royalty were frequent visitors, Queen Victoria visiting on many an occasion, with this lonely outpost offering unprecedented privacy from both press and public. Despite all these advantages and the Port Victoria to Sheerness ferry service, trade did not reach the expected level. with only local agricultural trade giving dwindling ticket sales a much-needed boost. By 1885 the pier itself was beginning to show signs of decay. Repairs were subsequently carried out, but Port Victoria's fortunes were only revived for a short period, when in 1900 a fire to the station and pier at Queensborough brought the ferry service there to Port Victoria. This, along with a service from the Dutch port of Flushing, lasted for 3 years, until Queensborough had been rebuilt. Although the expectations of the South Eastern and Chatham Railway for a major continental port now seemed to be rapidly diminishing, Port Victoria still remained in royalty's favour. The final visitation of such dignitaries taking place on the 12th of October 1913 by the King and Queen of Norway. On August the 11th, 1914, following the declaration of World War I, the pier itself was taken over by the Admiralty. But the gloom and poverty of the post-war years now meant there not being enough money even for its demolition. And so 1915 saw the pier being reduced in size to 250 feet, bringing the buffers forward to block off the seaward end. The opening of the Allhallows branch line in 1932 and the great resort rush meant the port being forgotten still further. And although elaborate plans were drawn up for the building of a station before the pier, a more mundane construction was subsequently erected. This now became the point of termination for the 2 trains per day that ran here. And so, less than 60 years from its grand beginnings and days of looking to a hopeful future, Port Victoria Pier was finally demolished in 1941, with the work being carried out by the Admiralty. Today, all that now remains are stumps of the pier's timbers seen at low tide, serving as a monument to a bold vision from another time. The area where the line approached Port Victoria is today owned by the Foster Yeoman Aggregates Company. The final stretch of line which ran to the sea wall having long since been removed. With relics of the past to remind us of days long gone, before new technology and industry have over the years shaped and gradually changed our way of life. One may now stand and look out across this river and maybe reflect on those early pioneers and visionaries' attempts at creating a brave new world of high hopes, never to be fully realised.